So, Sean, first off, thanks for being with me today. And second, congratulations. I understand your new book, Proverbs for Leadership, is out today. So, I know that's a huge deal, and I want to just tell
It
you
is.
congratulations.
Thank
Tell me
you.
a little bit about the book today.
So, Proverbs for Leadership, I've been posting for the past several months that it's coming out, and I've been referring to it as my personal manifesto. And I started writing the book a long time ago in 2011. And you know that when you're writing your first book, as this is my first book, that there's a lot of starts and stops and stalls.
Oh, yeah.
And I did not really get into it deeply until 2018. And my initial motivation of writing the book, and thank goodness I didn't stick with that initial motivation, was I was going to write a book to tell everyone how to conduct a business. The book was originally called Proverbs for Business, and it was Sean's way of doing things. And over time, as I wrote it, I realized that my ways were not necessarily the best ways. And what the book really needed to be about is what I've learned both about myself and how what I've learned has made me a different kind of leader. The subtitle of the book is so it's Proverbs for Leadership. You must understand and you must understand yourself and improve if you desire leadership that produces success in others. And it is my position that before anyone can be a leader, a qualified leader, a successful leader, they must first understand themselves and improve. Because if they don't have that personal awareness, then their leadership is going to fall flat with their team.
That is extremely powerful. So, first off, Sean, it definitely resonates. You talking about how you embarked on this project, right, and it morphed. And I think there's a lot of self-awareness that is infused into that kind of a journey. The beauty of that is over that 10, 12 year span. Obviously, you had a lot of realizations, and the project looked different, but it didn't stop you, right? You continued to plow forward and incorporate a lot of these lessons. And it really resonated with me when you said the importance around understanding yourself and improving to realize your, optimized state as a leader. I look back. And it's always so easy to connect the dots backwards. We can't connect them forwards. I look back at my time when I first was in leadership roles, and some of the discipline or polish that I might have lacked 20 years ago as a manager. Those are the types of lessons that were super important for me to learn. So, if you were, looking back on your career, what would you say were the most poignant lessons that molded what the book became?
I think one of the most poignant lessons is deciding which side of the road I'm going to stand on. And let me explain to you what I mean. When I finally hired a editor publisher, RTI Publishing, after I had interviewed 7 different organizations to finally help me get this book out, when they read through the book, they said, Sean, there's scripture throughout this book, but you dance around it. You don't cite it. There's obvious biblical principles here that you talk around and you don't name. So, Sean, you either need to pull it out and just talk about your experiences, or you need to cite all the scripture. So I went through the process of taking all the scripture that I had danced around and added it to the book as biblical principles. So looking back on my career, if there is one thing that I would immediately change, it would be publicly embracing my faith in a greater way. I have always been a faith filled person, but I have not always necessarily acted out as a faith filled person. Um, Going all the way back, at one point I was going to go to rabbinic school, and then I became a Christian years later. That's a whole nother conversation. But to embrace one's faith, I think really makes a difference in your leadership skills. The second big lesson that the book will portray is understanding the moderation that we all need to walk in. And that moderation is different between extroverts and introverts. I'm advocating that we all need to become more of an ambivert. The extrovert moderate themselves more introverted, the introvert moderate themselves more extroverted. If I had been more open about my faith and moderated myself, I think that many things that I experienced would have turned out different, not necessarily better, but different.
I think it's fascinating. A couple of things that you hit on there. One, being able to look back and realize some of the ways that maybe you could have or should have shown up differently. Obviously, we can't make changes, but we can make changes to how we address things in the present and going forward as a result. And I think, those key learnings, it speaks to everything that you just said. One of the other elements, and I read a statistic maybe a year or two ago, that 84% of everyone in the world aligns to some kind of faith. And so I think it's very important in a lot of cases that we look to what does our faith tell us in how we conduct ourselves, how we treat others, etc. And a lot of times those principles are very inherent, or at least they should be, in the way we work with the team, with others, etc. I can tell you I did a Bible study a few years back where it was exactly that. It was around looking to the Bible for examples of servant leadership and how Jesus conducted himself and just in how those messages can be applied to daily life. And so I think everybody, whether you're a Christian or not, you have the ability to look to your faith and to your religion to find some of those types of lessons. I think that's super valuable. One of the things that you talk about in your book is the how you as a leader can create an atmosphere that motivates group engagement. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So to motivate group engagement, everything goes back to understanding yourself and improving. When I've led people, I need to be aware, self-aware, sometimes painfully aware of my own extrovert nature or my ability to dominate a conversation. If you're going to motivate your team, that doesn't mean that you dominate the conversation. It means that you may shepherd the conversation. There was a specific situation that I recall years ago, back before we had video like this, when everything was a conference call and it was just voices on the phone. And I was having my weekly conference call with my team. And I had one manager, a manager local in Louisville, who was with me, and he never said anything during the calls. And when one of the calls ended, I looked at him and I asked him, I was like, why are you so quiet? He's like, you talk enough for all of us and you have all the answers anyways. Oh, oh, spearing me through the heart. And I looked at him, I said, you're going to lead the meeting next week because this guy was qualified. This guy was great at what he did. He was well respected. His customers loved him. And I realized that I had been overwhelming him. So the next week, when he led the meeting, he came alive. This introverted manager, all of a sudden, I saw a whole side of him that I had never seen before. And he was funny. He drew conversation out of the rest of the managers. And I just kind of sat back in awe. And it made me realize that everyone brings something to the table. They may not be excellent at everything I'm at, but certainly there are things that they are excellent at that I am not at. And as leaders, we need to recognize those specific attributes in our team and encourage them.
That's powerful, Sean. Everybody brings something to the table. I'm a subscriber to the belief that everybody has their unique superpowers. It's what makes them qualified or uniquely qualified to do what they do. And I believe that everybody has the right to be in the role that they've earned. Who am I to tell them how to do it? It's more my job to observe and figure out how I can lift them up, how I can make them better, how I can make recommendations around who could be mentors or how they could seek out ways to improve themselves. I look back at, my leadership career, and when I first was promoted years ago, I didn't have anyone really coaching and training me on how to be a good manager or a good leader. So I thought I needed to be tough as nails. I had to be bulletproof. I had to be cold as ice. I had to be the hero. I had to be the one who could hop on any call at any time and close the deal for my team when I ran a call center. And don't get me wrong, there were some elements of that were enjoyable as a 20 something sales manager, but I
Yeah.
compare and contrast that to what I do now. And I think the big difference is being the hero maker instead of the hero, lifting up your team, looking for ways to, recognize and praise them, give them that opportunity to shine. I think that's what you really articulated so well there. And then making sure that they're a part of everything. It's not up to a leader to make all the decisions. It's up to a leader to get all the facts, get all the information, make sure the team is included, and that you've given that opportunity for them to engage and give feedback and making the decision that is going to be best for all of the people. And I think that is the key element that really enhances what you just said. One of the other things too, and you talk about this a little bit in your book, is listening to your team. What does that mean to you? How can leaders today better listen to their team?
So it's interesting when we think about listening to our team. There is a scripture, 1 Timothy 4:12, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't quote it exactly,
Sure.
but the paraphrase is, "Don't look down on the youth." So when you look at that, I attribute that to considering that you do not know where your next pearl of wisdom is going to come from. Someone that is on your team that is younger, or someone on your team that may even be older than you, that doesn't have the same experiences that you do, or they have different experiences. They may look at something with a naivete, a lack of experience, and they end up coming up with the answer that to them is so obvious, but because of our experiences, it has soured us to seeing something obvious because been there, done that. But when you look at it from another perspective, the answer is obvious to others. So always approach your team, is the advice I have to people, that they know something you don't, or in their ignorance, strong word, but in their ignorance, they will probably give you a solution that you hadn't thought of.
Good leaders are not threatened by where great ideas or results come from. You
Absolutely.
have to have the confidence and the wherewithal, frankly, to stoke the flame of the people that are working for you or your colleagues, to encourage them. And I think that's another big difference, comparing and contrasting. And to your point too, Sean, you got to let them have the opportunity to have experience. You've got to let them have the opportunity sometimes to fail, as painful as that is to watch. Because frankly, I look back at a lot of my uh, key lessons and learnings in life, and it's because I failed. And it's a good thing in hindsight that those types of things happen. So we have to give them the opportunity to do it their way, to go down the path. Obviously, giving constructive advice and feedback and guidance. It's kind of like with our kids. We can't force them to do things a certain way. We can only make the environment as conducive as possible for making good choices. But people are going to make their own choices. Something
Well,
else
and,
that you,
and let,
yeah,
let me just add real quick. When you talk
please.
about failure, and this is something that I learned years ago, and when I tell people that they failed, they get all upset. But there was a meeting that I was in probably 15 years ago where our CEO told me, "You failed, Sean." And it was in front of a large group. "You failed in this." And he said it rather forcefully. And what I came to realize after that interaction is that there is a difference between the noun failure and the verb failure. What my CEO was communicating to me at the time was the verb, that I had not taken the actions that I needed to take to correct the situation. He was not calling me a failure, the noun, putting that on me. It was a learning opportunity that, just like you said, there's nothing wrong with failure so long as you learn from it, but don't be a failure.
I love that so much. And it reminds me of so many times where, look, sometimes we're up against ridiculous odds or all hope seems lost, and you may fail, but even an inevitability of failure doesn't stop you from trying or going through what you know to be the right movements. And I would say another thing, and this is a theme from your book as well, is how often we get in our own way. Um, I think many of us struggle with and grapple with imposter syndrome and,
Mhm.
lack of confidence at times. And it's so easy. I'm currently reading, one of my mentors recommended to me, The Obstacle is the Way, and being able to look at every scenario as the path as opposed to a blocker or a potential for failure. And it's, how much control we have to be able to not only resist or refuse to be pulled into negative self-talk, but also that, I find if somebody asks me for advice, it's very easy to give because
Yes.
the emotional attachment to that outcome is less than it is with myself when I'm in my own head and saying, well, this is hopeless. Um, what are your thoughts around self-talk, self-sabotage? How can we identify these moments or these states of being, quell that, and make it through, persevere?
See, and thank you for asking me that because to me, self-talk and self-sabotage, those are the first steps of understanding yourself and improving. We've all been programmed from a young age from people telling us things. Uh, People told me I talked too much, that I was hyperactive, that my mouth was going to get me in trouble one day. And at a certain point in my career, I kind of acted out on that because I had heard it for years and years and years, as opposed to understanding that God made me this way. And it was my responsibility to temper that and use it as a strength. So the self talk that you have, it's all important that you not just let your surroundings create the self-talk within you, but what are you feeding on? People talk about binge watching Netflix or whatever. I tend to binge watch YouTube, um, watching your videos, watching Evan Carmichael, watching Grant Cardone, watching Bryn Tillman, watching Randy Chafee, all kinds of people for encouraging words as a motiversity on YouTube, all kinds of things to encourage me, and watching great preachers or even listening to them as I walk my dog Solomon, who's on the cover of the book, listening to Joel Osteen, Kenneth Copeland, Pastor Bob Rogers, listening to all of them, filling myself with something different than what I was filled with as a child. So that then affects my self talk. When it comes to self sabotage, we each need to understand the triggers that set us off. And I've said this to many people at one point in time in life. I had an anger problem. I would just have a hair switch anger problem where I wouldn't necessarily explode, but boy, you could see it in my eyes. You could see it in my countenance. And I have had to learn what it is that sets me off and set up mental steps, physical steps, even to avoid that type of self sabotage. For me, it's been being quiet as one thing and listening for comprehension as opposed to just hearing what someone has to say and allowing my mind to shoot off.
That's so good, Sean. What I'm hearing you say is, first off, great, just really diverse mix of folks that you're getting materials from and really absorbing. And I think that's key. You have to seek out who's doing what you want to be doing, or where is there a message that really speaks to you. But something that hit me that you were talking about is just even being able to look back and finding truth in some of the constructive feedback that you've gotten in your life, right? Because I think at the moment, a lot of times, if somebody gives me constructive feedback, or historically when they have, I've shrugged it off. Oh, they're wrong. They don't know what they're talking about, right? I was told years ago, that I didn't play the political game very well. This was, 20 years ago when I was first starting out in management. And it's like you got to play the game. And I made it so far on, just hard work and, outworking everyone around me that I was blind to see the blind spots. And, I remember a leader years ago telling me, like, Carson, you're a supernova, but with the right polish, you could be a great leader. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm a great leader now. That was my reaction. But I was
Yes.
wrong. And I look back now and it makes perfect sense. It's crystal clear. I know exactly what they were talking about. I had to learn that it wasn't all about me. And, I always struggled with not feeling good enough for others, right? So I felt like I had to overcompensate for that by, pointing out all the great things I was doing. And in doing that, it made me come off in a way that I wouldn't have wanted to as a leader, but I was too blind to see it at the time. So getting to a point where I was comfortable enough in my own skin, comfortable enough with my mission, my achievements that I don't need to be seen anymore. I want to lift other people up. But it took me a while to get to that point. And I think that's why we have to look at the root cause of some of the self-talk, the self-sabotage. What might be causing us to act that way? And even if in the moment that you're getting that constructive feedback, you can't react and respond the right way, absorb it. And when you're ready, revisit it and try to find the truth in the constructive feedback. I think that's a really valuable lesson.
And when you talk about feedback, I mean, I have several chapters in my book specifically about feedback. And I'll tell you why there's so many chapters, because I was horrible at receiving feedback and giving feedback for a large span of my career. But when you look at the Bible, you hear about rebukes, you hear about correction, you hear about chastisement, which sounds like a terrible word, but it's only another word for correction. It's just a little bit more intense correction with your positive outcome in mind. So when you can accept feedback and not put it aside and really have courageous conversations with people when someone is giving you feedback, it makes all the difference in the world. And yeah, every feedback you receive isn't necessarily in your own best interest, but that's where, as mature adults, we need to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff and understand what someone else's agenda might be versus what is for our own personal growth. And once you get to that point, then when you start giving people feedback, you approach it from a whole different perspective.
Courageous conversations. I love that. It does. It takes courage sometimes to have tough conversations. I found oftentimes, again, I internalize these things. I think about how hard it is for me to have a tough conversation. And the reality is, you're not doing anybody a favor by sparing them constructive feedback that can make them better. And they're going to look back and they're going to appreciate it. I'm very appreciative of a lot of the tough conversations, the experiences that I've had, no matter how painful they were in the moment. And even when things have been done wrong to me, I can still find the truth in that situation and why I'm better because of it. So I'm grateful for that. Sean, we're coming up on time. I would love to give you any other opportunity to throw out any topics that you want to make sure our audience absorbs today. This has been amazing. I think you've covered a lot of key pillars of not only leadership but just being a good human, and I appreciate that very much. So, anything else that you want to tackle before we sign off today?
Sure. So, Carson, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you about this and recording this. I really appreciate it. You've got a tremendous following, and to just have you interview me is just a great honor, especially on this launch day of my book. People are interested in my book. I encourage you to go to Amazon, type in Proverbs for Leadership, Sean, Sean. The Kindle version is available today for only 99 cents. It's a special launch rate. A paperback will be coming out soon enough, but for now, I encourage you to get the Kindle version. The book is 30 chapters long, so it's a good one chapter a day kind of book covering everything from all about yourself to how to lead your team. And then finally, if you're interested in connecting with me, I'm all over social media. Sean Litvak, Sean Litvak, Litvak, or just type in Litvak Leadership. And you can also go to proverbsforleadership.com to sign up for my weekly newsletter and occasional text.
Beautiful. Sean, this was amazing. Thank you. Congratulations again. Proverbs for Leadership. I'm going to put a link into the post here and hope everyone enjoys the opportunity to dive into Proverbs for Leadership. Thanks again for being with me today, and look forward to continuing the dialogue someday soon. Sean, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carson. You have a great day.
Back at you. All the best.